Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Humankind, where the Bolivar update promises to deliver quality. Let's go through what it's going to deliver before being one of the 10% to gracefully touch the like button. Let's begin and jump into the spiciest announcement of all: clean pollution. There's no denying that before launch, they say, we severely underestimated the industrial powers our players would create in the late game, so the pollution system was more restricted for these players than intended. While we have already tweaked the balance to stop the game from ending too soon, some players still have problems with the local and global penalties for pollution. Here's a key for the Cultures of Africa DLC, by the way, which I won competing in the Humankind Pollution Creators Challenge. It was a very fun challenge, and therefore I'm fairly familiar with the pollution system in Humankind now. And also, being someone who's played the game from the start, I can absolutely, absolutely guarantee you that the community did feel that way. Pollution was one of, maybe still remains, one of the most divisive gameplay features in Humankind. So what are they going to do about it? Well, in the Bolivar update, they'll be allowing us to, quote, disable the penalties for pollution, end quote, so that we can build our cities without worrying about pollution limits. This is a really interesting change. Effectively, it'll just allow us to disable the pollution system. Up until now, and in a previous update that came out, I think late last year, we were able to turn off pollution as a victory condition, so the game wouldn't forcibly end due to pollution. However, the impacts of pollution would still be felt. The negative stability, the overwhelming negative stability, and then the flow-on effects that has on your food production and all sorts of other things. Now, with the Bolivar update, we'll be able to just turn off those negative impacts altogether, effectively disabling the pollution system and rendering it entirely useless. I think that this will probably attract quite a few players. We can delve into why they did this. The Cat of Nine Tails wrote, we do want to return to pollution and flesh it out more in future, but it is one of the several big topics we want to overhaul and expand, so it may take us some time to get to it, or a lot of time, depending on which order we take to tackle the big topics in. That's an interesting sentence. I'll unpack that a little bit later in the video. That's why we decided to add this option to disable the effects in the meantime. So there we go. That's kind of the mindset behind it. It's a big system. It's complicated. Amplitude appear to be focusing their attention on other things. So as part of the quality of life improvements with the Bolivar update, they've decided that they will allow us to just blanket ban pollution. Turn it off. Don't suffer the consequences. This may attract players back to Humankind who didn't like the pollution system. It may also potentially help to create more of an easy mode where you can disable pollution and make the game a little bit easier for you. Although, of course, it will also make the game easier for the AI. So I'm unclear how that will actually affect overall difficulty, but it's something to bear in mind. The next change that they've teased towards us today is this one, and it's around infrastructures, city infrastructures in particular, and how the UI shows them. It's actually quite a useful one, I think. Basically, it builds on the UI that we have when we're first founding cities, like you've seen me do in this sexy Olmec gameplay, but instead we'll be able to essentially see a preview of the yields that new infrastructure will give us here on our cities. A really nice quality of life changement. Sure. It removes the guesswork involved. Sometimes I found that I was just sort of picking an infrastructure and kind of hoping for the best, roughly eyeballing how many forests I had and thinking, this lumberyard will probably get me about +10. Good news, with this update, we'll now be able to hopefully upfront that a lot more easily in the AI, which will allow for better urban planning and hopefully also allow us to make better use of the in-game's infrastructures, because these infrastructures are incredibly powerful and often overlooked, I think. We'll also get existing yields as well, so there'll be a better sort of UI interface so that we can understand existing infrastructure yields to benefit those that we're adding to our cities. Urban planning made easy. Sounds good to measy. Next up, and if you'll forgive the pun, we're moving through to our administrative centers and potentially giving them, as you can see here, a modern coat of paint. Essentially, the idea behind this is an aesthetic improvement to Humankind. Some players have argued that it doesn't really fit their aesthetic, that modern main plazas are mixed with ancient main plazas, or that at least like the option to change it, and now we will have that. We'll have the option to renovate our administrative centers to have a more modern appearance inside of the city screen. Like I say, it is entirely optional. I'll probably make the most of it, but because it's an aesthetic change, it of course won't actually impact the mechanics of the game itself. and therefore I won't really spend much more time here discussing it, other than to note it could be a nice quality of life improvement for those sweet, sweet screenshots that you might be capturing. Next up, and this one is more impactful on the game, it's to do with the stability overlays. Stability is a very powerful tool. Overlaid against pollution in particular, you'll feel its negative effects. But of course, it's really the happiness multiplier inside of humankind. It helps to ring fence growth, it helps to ring fence your populations, really the entire game balanced on a happiness quota, kind of. Now we'll receive a dedicated space for stability outside of the 0 to 100 range tooltip. And you'll see that in the screenshot I've showed. Basically, you can see how much stability in excess you have. Nice to know for future planning of districts. Next up, we have a slight change to the way that modding works, but it's actually just the way that mods are loaded. Reloading the mod configuration of your latest save will work in the next game update when you relaunch the game. This has been a little sort of time-consuming, inconvenient factor to using mods in Humankind, which are, of course, still in their beta versions, as I understand it, and I don't know timeframes to do with that. But it's nice to see a little bit of quality of life so that we can actually make better use of these mods, because people have put a great amount of time and produced some really quality products that significantly improve, update, revolutionize Humankind. It's really good to see some back-end support so that we can make better use of those. I'm really keen to see more of this. It's a good start. Next up, I'd like to draw on, unfortunately, some bad news. Stadia players. Unfortunately, the certification process for your patch encountered a, quote, potential problem. Amplitude are investigating whether they'll be able to push it through. This is sort of outside of my wheelhouse. I play on Steam, and I haven't played Humankind on Game Pass, really, or definitely not on Stadia. So I'm not familiar with how fast those other versions are updating alongside the Steam one. My understanding is that each different platform has their own certification processes and so on and so forth, and it seems like the Google Stadia one is encountering some issues between Amplitude and that platform. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you, our Stadia brethren. And finally, I'd like to now bring back a topic that I mentioned at the start of the video. Crucially, this sentence here, or a lot of the time, depending on which order we tackle the big topics in. This is one of the developers talking about their return to pollution to flesh it out more as an in-game mechanic. They note that there are several key topics that need an overhaul or fleshing out or improving, whatever words we'd like to use, however we'd like to spin it. The idea here is essentially there are mechanics in the game that Amplitude want to put time into to revamp and revolutionize. Pollution is one of them. And obviously, this comment dictates that there are many more. I'm sure you in the comments can probably think of your own ones. For some of you, it may be religion. For some of you, it may be international relations in the later game. A World Congress? Anybody? Just me? It's just me. Or, you know, any other factor in the game. Those significant features that underpin it. I think religion is a great example. Not necessarily that it needs it, but it is an example. Likewise, pollution. Here, I think they've hinted at what we could potentially expect to see for future development in Humankind. And I think also if we look back over the last now 9 months of Humankind's post-launch development, we can see that play out. We've received the Cultures of Africa DLC, and we continue to receive regular in-game updates around once a month, fixing things, improving things, in the case of pollution, disabling things, but overall providing a more effective Humankind experience and a more enjoyable Humankind experience at that. I think moving forward, we should expect to see more changes like this, incremental changes, quality of life changes, gameplay balance, update, and tinkering around the edges before, by the sounds of things, they really delve in and start to unpack some of the big issues or improvements that they want to overhaul. That's just my take. I would love to hear yours. That's all for my update today on the Humankind Bolivar update. We don't yet have the date for when this will hit our screens. I'll keep you posted when we hear more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.